You, me, or nobody is gonna hit as hard as life. But it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take.
Plan. I'm the enemy, because I like to think.
You can travel like a Bobby doll. You can hang out like a biker's mom. You fit in anywhere you go. Bring your own style just to steal the show. You shine it so loud when I'm flowing your set. Drink with the light, you drink and smoke on your bed. Love by all yourself, you know. You're always involved, you're the star that show.
Hello and welcome to another Fulton Land Live, everyone. Hope you guys are doing well. Russ, how you doing this morning?
Yeah, good, thanks. Yeah, still got an injury, but I'm all right. I managed to train this week, but hamstring was still playing up, which is just in time for me to go back and fight next week. Lovely, lovely. So but other than that, yeah, all good. Lots of drawing.
Cool.
You know, the life of a comic book artist. Very boring.
Well,
for other people, not for me. I'm having
Yeah.
a great time.
I was going to say, you're drawing entire new worlds.
Yeah.
We were just looking at the layouts that Russ has done for Chapter 2 of The Outliers and telling you guys you are in for a treat. We've shown off. We'll show a couple new layouts today at the end of the show. So I hope you guys are able to stick around for that. The energy and the scope of the story in Chapter 1 gets ramped up in Chapter 2. So Chapter 1 is basically introducing you guys to the team, give you an idea of what they can do. They have a threat that they have to go against, which turns out to be worse than what they were told they could expect. So they have to try and deal with that. And then at the end of Chapter 1, they're all kind of settled down, and we see a little teaser at the end, which lets one of the team members know that something fishy's going on. And so that brings us into Chapter 2, and we see Chapter 2 open up with the team. They feel safe and secure in their headquarters. They're working out. They're talking a little bit about what happened in their previous adventure, and they're talking a little bit about what's going on in their careers at that point in time. And then there's this enormous explosion, and they have to go find out what's going on. What's it all about? And from there, it's just chaos. So I'm really happy with how the layouts have turned out. I was telling Russ that my initial impressions are this is all great. I'm going to go over them with a fine-tooth comb later on today, and then I'll give Russ any of my notes, and then he's off to the races. He'll start working on finished pencils within a few days. So it's good stuff. Exciting times here at Fulton Castle and on Team Outliers. It's good stuff. So with that little project update finished, let's get to the chat. Hello, Jim Cox, first one in today. Glad you could make it. Ballandor says somebody is late and gay. Well, with this sort of hairstyle, I mean, this doesn't just happen on its own, Bill.
Which one's which?
Yeah, I mean, this takes time and attention and care. Miracles don't just happen overnight.
I've not seen a hairdryer in years, or a comb.
Inkfinity Comics is here. Welcome, Alejandro. Arisaga. Hey, Brian, how's it going? Amanda B. Not sure if I'm liking the blonde thunderbuds. It may need to grow on me. Well, I can tell you it's far itchier than I would like. So it won't last long, I promise you. Roland is here. He says he's knee deep into the new Master of the Universe Origins line. We're going to talk a little bit about Masters of the Universe today. Bale asks, where do I sign for a red-headed Thunderbuns? Well, come back when I'm wearing my red afro, and you'll get as much red Thunderbuns as you can handle. George Travelos is here. Good morning, George. Or actually, for you, it's probably afternoon. Maybe you're on your lunch break. Glad you could join us today. And Johnny Rando, it's good to see you here. The Beampad is joining us today. Welcome, Beampad. Jim Cox says, he buns. Johnny Rando says, there's a carnival somewhere, one bearded lady shy. Yeah, they're only open on the weekends, so I'm able to hang out with you guys during the week.
Takes a lot of energy to look this good all the time.
Woodrow's here. Good morning,
Hello,
sir. I do believe it's still morning for you. Good to see you, Woodrow. A ginger fro. Yeah, absolutely. Carrot Top's got nothing on me. At least when I'm wearing the ginger fro. So, Russ, I was thinking lately, and oh, by the way, if anybody hasn't answered the poll, we do have a YouTube poll going in the chat. Is Classic He-Man prettier than Classic She-Ra? And we'll get into. I had one at first. I said it was just, is He-Man prettier than She-Ra? Forget any of the new stuff that's masquerading as those characters. We're only talking about the real stuff from 1984, 1985, and so that's what we're talking about here with the poll question. And it's pretty close. It's been neck and neck so far since I put the poll up. So we'll see how that ends up at the end of the show. But anyway, I was thinking, I put the thumbnail up with He-Man and having the sword of power, and he's saying, "I have the power." And I don't know if Russ, if you saw that documentary series called "The Toys That Made Us."
Yes, I saw the one with He-Man. Yeah.
Okay, so I thought it was fascinating that in the play testing that they talked about, the kids were playing with the figures, and it was one of the kids who said, "I have the power," as he's holding this muscle-bound action figure with this giant sword. And some marketing genius said, "That's it. That's our tagline," because that's what the kids are seeing in this, in these toys. The story that's playing in that kid's head is that he is this barbarian, and that he has the power to do whatever is going on in his imagination.
Yeah.
And so they realized that the way to quickly communicate the idea that, this Masters of the Universe toy line is a power fantasy that little boys especially, but the occasional little girl too, because they put Teela in there. They figured, if there's going to be any chance of getting girls to buy these toys as well, then we should go for it. They put Teela in there. They put the Sorceress in there. These are beautiful, women. And in fact, there were enough girls buying Masters of the Universe toys when the original line came out that they decided within a year to do She-Ra, basically a female version of He-Man. And in that show, they did the same sort of thing where it was geared towards girls, but they put a male character in there, maybe a couple. It's so long since
It's a long time.
I remember watching it just to see if it was going to be cool, and I was like, okay, I still like He-Man better. So if my sister wants to watch She-Ra, she can knock herself out, but it's He-Man for me. And Roland here says Masters of the Universe was actually 40% female at its peak. Now, see, this is a great example of the toy company realizing that they've captured one part of their potential market, the boys.
Hmm.
They have an opportunity to try to capture girl fans, customers, toy buyers, their parents as well. So rather than reject the audience or the customer base they had already earned in order to go chase after this new one, they decided to try to retain that customer base they had earned and then bring in additional customers.
Good Lord, who would have thought of that?
Isn't that genius?
Back when you had, you mentioned, you said genius marketing person.
Mm-hmm.
Back when you had genius marketing people rather than psychoanalysts and behavioral analysts running marketing campaigns. Because instead of wanting to manipulate someone to buy something, you simply entertain someone enough that they would buy it. And you can see that in some of the advertising back in the UK, actually. Mm-hmm. Advertising now is just hideous. I remember, not that long ago, 15, 20 years, certainly, when a lot of adverts were very funny, very well written. They made you laugh and you remembered the product and you were entertained, so you remember the product. That doesn't happen as much now. Yeah,
and so Amanda B here is an example of the way you appeal to your customers. In Amanda's case, so she says she loves She-Ra, but she loved He-Man too. So that's a case of, here's a customer that loves, I'll just say one half of the product offering, right? And then you try to give them more of what they want, more He-Man figures, more He-Man playsets, more He-Man vehicles, but then you also try to bring in new customers through She-Ra line of toys and the cartoon and all of that.
Why destroy a current market, a current customer base, to add another one? Well, especially if you don't have that other one yet. I mean, it's ridiculous. Never take away, add.
Yeah, add to it rather than subtract. Yeah. And so what I was saying about how the marketing people at the toy company, they understood that when those kids were playtesting those prototype He-Man action figures, they saw what was happening is there was this power fantasy going on in these kids' imaginations. There's this story that's being told because they told the kids essentially, this is the story of Eternia. This is the story of He-Man and Cringer, or Prince Adam and Cringer, and by the power of Grayskull, this magic sword, they turn into He-Man and Battle Cat, and then da-da-da-da-da. Well, from there, the kids take that story and then they add to it in their own imaginations. And they suddenly cast themselves, in these power fantasies where they're these super strong barbarian types that can do all kinds of things that the kids themselves could never do. Yeah. Right. And that's one of the reasons why stories are so powerful, is because when we are reading a good story, or we're listening to a good story, or we're watching a good story on film or television or theater or whatever it is, video games, same thing. When the story is immersive, it captures our imagination in a way that would not have occurred to us that we could think about these things before.
No.
Right? It opens up a new world, so to speak, for us to inhabit for a while through our imaginations. And when we do that, it takes us away from the monotony that most of us experience in day-to-day life, whether it's through the monotony of brushing your teeth or having to go buy groceries at the store or the monotony of commuting to and from work. I mean, we all have whatever. For me, it's household chores. I'm an at-home dad, so I got household chores to do every day. Let me tell you, I'm way more productive with the household chores after being able to listen to YouTube live streams and playback live streams and being able to listen to videos that people record. Way more productive at that than before I discovered YouTube. Because before, I was just doing the chores and then I would just try to kind of keep myself entertained with whatever was going through my imagination. But after I discovered all these different channels with content I enjoy, I can listen to that while I'm doing this monotonous work. And there's a story that's being told in every show, in every video. There's a story that's being told. And when I'm listening to it, I can imagine what's going on. And then I can also add to that story. I can add my own opinion about whatever is going on in a conversation, or if it's a recorded video and someone's providing commentary, I can imagine, adding my own commentary on top of that. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about today was not just the power of storytelling, which I think a lot of us understand and recognize because we are into reading comics, or we're into watching film, or we're into playing video games, whatever the medium is where we're taking in these stories, we understand the appeal to them, and we want stories that will speak to us in a way that not only we can relate to in some way, but stories that will capture the imagination. Because when that happens, it takes us out of the monotony, or sometimes it's the difficulty of day-to-day life. There are people who live with debilitating health conditions, sometimes incurable. And for them, life literally is suffering. To paraphrase an old axiom, some philosopher, I think, is the one who coined the term "life is suffering." But for some, for some people, it literally is suffering each and every day. And so they rely on the power of stories to take them, away from that suffering for a little while and simply enjoy whatever that story that's being told through whatever medium it happens to be.
That's why soap operas do so well on the television, even though some of them over here can be incredibly depressing things. But it takes you away. It's like if these people have got problems worse than me, then I don't have to think about my problems for a while. I just bury myself in that story. It's not. I don't find that much fun, but I can understand why people might want to watch it. And certainly a lot of it's entertaining. The best one we have over here is something called Coronation Street, and something it doesn't do it as well as it used to, but something it's always done better than any of the other soap operas is include humor and keep people that have some levity, have some fun in it, and it keeps people coming back for more. And from a comic book perspective, you could say, well, what, or an animation perspective, what on earth is relatable about He-Man in a castle Grayskull with a big sword and a massive lion or tiger or whatever it is that he rides on? Well, the reason it's relatable is because his alter ego sometimes makes mistakes, and He-Man tries to correct them the best way he can, and he looks for the best way of doing that without hurting people, apart from obviously the bad guys. But even then, he doesn't kill the bad guys. And there's a relatable aspect to that. Is we all make mistakes, including kids. We're doing it all the time. We're making mistakes all the time, and in one way or another, we kind of work our way around it, and either forgiven or make it good. And that's why it's relatable. It's not the actual He-Man. It's not the character per se. It's the things that they do and the heroics. It's the hero's journey all the time. It's a very important thing. It's very important for kids to see that kind of stuff. And that's why the whole idea of, no, I must see my lived experience in every story, or I must see myself in every story is ridiculous.
Mhm.
Because you need to look beyond that.
Yeah,
That's
well,
the whole point.
yeah, and using the He-Man example, you were just talking about how Prince Adam, the quote unquote weaker character, even though they look exactly the same in the original show. Prince Adam with his pink vest and his lavender tights.
And his massive biceps.
It, and the thing though is, if you were only to look at it at the very surface level, somebody might say, oh well, why would a kid want that? I mean, those giant muscles and weapons and this guy with the three eyes or the guy with the metal jaw, what kid wants to do that? That's ugly. And it's like, you don't understand what those toys represented to those kids is a power fantasy where they could go from, and how many kids feel powerless in a world that's run by adults?
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah.
And what those toys told them is that when you play with these toys, you can be powerful. You're powerful when you're playing with these toys, not powerless. And so the kids, and I was one of them, I would be playing with those action figures and I would be imagining, what it would be like. And I would be saying, oh yeah, I'm going to look like this when I grow up. Right. So it's not only a power fantasy for the moment, but it's also like for the future. Right. And it gives a kid who normally would feel powerless on a day-to-day basis, where they're being told to go to school, they're being told to clean their room, they try and act out and they get punished for it. But when they're playing with those toys, they can be the most, the strongest guy in the universe.
I was, I won't give my age away, but I'm probably a little bit older than you. So I wasn't playing with those toys. But something that I remember very, very vividly about all of the things that I loved, comic books, cartoons, sci-fi shows. It was, for me, it wasn't an empowerment thing. I was just completely enamored with escapism. I loved science fiction.
Yeah.
I loved anything that wasn't boring and ordinary. I don't want to watch the news. I don't want to watch current affairs. I don't want to watch dramas. I don't want to watch comedies. I am not interested. Where's the cartoon? And it didn't matter whether it was Star Trek or whether it was Scooby-Doo. It didn't matter. It just didn't matter. And I knew that Scooby-Doo, every time it was those meddling kids and the guy got the mask taken off. Sorry, spoilers, everyone. It was never a ghost. It was never, but it didn't matter. It was crazy stuff. And I just loved the escapism. I really did. I can understand, I can understand certain aspects of empowerment. For me personally, it was more about, I'm not saying that I was never felt empowered by them, because I'm sure I did. But I definitely, my whole life, right from the very word go, all of the things that I loved were science fiction or fantasy. It was all about getting away. It was not this world, it was another world. And how deep could I get into that world without, not nerdily, just how far could I let myself fall into it? And even watching, I did watch the He-Man cartoons. I didn't play with the toys, but I watched the cartoons. And again, I still watch cartoons. I still rather watch a cartoon on the telly than, and no, not one of the new 3D CGI cartoons. I'm talking about proper animation. I'd rather watch Tom and Jerry than the news, put it that way. So Thundercats was great. Just anything that took you away. And when you look at the storytelling that went on in He-Man in the cartoons, it was very simple. It was extremely simple. And to be honest, the world wasn't that amazing. Right. Because the animation was so simple, wasn't it? Everything was stripped down. It was very simple, but I still managed to enjoy it from an escapist perspective. I just watched it, and like there were these things on the other side of the universe, and they were beating the crap out of each other.
Yeah.
Good guys won. Excellent. That's all I needed. That's all most kids need.
Yeah.
To be honest, they just need good, good fun entertainment, and occasionally you can slip in some education. Occasionally, which is what is great about all ages comics. Why I love.
Yep.
Unfortunately, nowadays it's kids comics, but all ages I think is an amazing thing, because there is education in them without you even trying. Just from not talking down, not writing down to a child or to your reader, and letting them discover their own way through the story. And if they don't understand a word, then go look it up. That's what I did when I was a kid. So these stories don't have to be deep. They don't have to be educational. They can be. They can have more complicated messages in them, but they don't have to.
Right.
In fact, most of it shouldn't, in my view. Most of it should be entertainment, and then you can sort of lightly drop things in and let people find their own way.
Yeah. And there was obviously a lot of these cartoons are very formulaic, and the reason is because successful formulas make money, and nobody's going to be producing comics or films or cartoons or video games on a large scale if they don't think they can make money, because quite frankly, too much time and work goes into it to not make money at it, because we all have bills to pay. We all have our lives that we lead where we have to pay for the basic essentials of life. So if we're going to be putting so much time and work into creating these stories, these imaginary worlds that people can escape into, and help them to see things maybe in a different way that they hadn't considered before, but because a different part of the brain is being exercised, maybe it opens up some insight that they wouldn't have discovered otherwise, that they can then apply to their quote unquote real life. And now they've got their quality of life has just been improved by some measure.
Exactly. Just by opening people's eyes. It's a way you can write all kinds of stuff into fantasy, and it can open people's eyes to looking at the world differently. I mean, all you need to do is look at the first interracial kiss on Star Trek. It's just people looked at the world differently after that day, or a lot of people did. That it's a great thing, like that kind of storytelling. That's what it's all about. That's why a lot of the storytelling today is just so clumsy, beating you over the head with ideology instead of putting morally upright things. So, for instance, anti-racist talking points, any kind of anti-bigotry, and putting that into your stories, allowing that to be in your stories, showing examples of good and bad, and letting the reader decide what or letting the reader come to terms with what the story's telling them, showing them and letting them investigate it for themselves, go out into the world and think critically about reality and about the people around them, and also to give those people room, but be compassionate, and empathize with people, and that's something else that stories allow you to do. They allow young readers to learn empathy.
Yeah,
because what they're doing is they're instantly you become attached to a character in a story. You empathize with them. So if you can empathize with an imaginary character, then you can empathize with real people, even though you may not know them.
Right.
And so you can empathize with others, and so those boundaries can be put down, can be torn down, and then you can move around horrible aspects to society like bigotry and what have you. You can move around those things and actually understand why some people are doing it. Some people in the world, they might be terrorists, they might be, murderers, whatever. At some point in time, you've got to understand what's driving these people to do these things.
Yeah.
You have to. It's because you can't just go around cutting everybody's heads off. It doesn't work. That just doesn't work. You have to have empathy. You have to empathize. Why would somebody do this? So I can understand. So I can maybe stop this from happening again. Yeah, and stories. And I'm just picking out this one aspect of empathy and this one aspect of society. Stories are at the heart. Storytelling is at the heart of our culture. It's the heart of any culture.
Yeah.
Because it lets one generation talk to another without asking direct questions. It's sort of like you hand down knowledge and wisdom and morals via these great stories. And that's why they shouldn't be hitting people over the head with ideology in the stories. They should be allowing people to work their own path through the stories. And that's why we love these cartoons when we're kids, because they just they put it out there and they just went, there you go, this is action, this is fun, the good guy always wins, and there's a reason for it. Okay, there you go. And even things down to there was a long running one. Again, excuse me, everybody, because I can't remember names very well. Is it something to do with King Arthur? Is it Camelot? Camelot.
You talking about the film?
No. There was I think it was like an anime. I think it was like Camelot in space or something like that. I can't remember the exact. Yeah, it was running back in the day,
sure.
back in a similar time when G-Force was running and all that. So it was like early anime stuff over in the UK, and even that kind of stuff. Again, this is great for episodic content. They had a long-running story. Okay, but yeah, Brave Star as well. They had a long-running story, but they just got bits of that each episode, and each episode was episodic in its nature. It had a nice story within it that you could deliver sort of concepts about moral behavior and all kinds of wrongs and rights and the hero's journey and all the rest of it. But it also had a long running, so even that kind of storytelling had a place and was worthwhile, and you could, as a kid, you could appreciate that as well. Although I have to say, just like the hit of something like He-Man, what was it, 20 minutes or something?
Yeah, it was a 22-minute cartoon
22
show.
minutes. You just sit. I mean, you could just sit down, eat your dinner while you're watching it, and just enjoy it for what it was. I think there's something about He-Man was that it was very simple, and as such was really easy to consume.
But you were talking about stories are passed. Generational knowledge is passed down through stories from one generation to the next, but then also you're talking about stories being cross-cultural. So you could, like, for example, we could read in 21st century US for me, UK for you, we could read ancient Greek mythology, and we could get valuable insights into life through those stories that apply to our 21st century life that we're living today.
Yeah.
And one of the things, there's a comment here. Welcome, Eric Canetti. Thanks for joining us. Good to see you here. He says, I think inexperienced writers often confuse theme with ideology. And I want to recommend to anybody watching either now or in the replay, look into Joseph Campbell. And he's got different works. The Hero with 1,000 Faces is a classic. It's one of the biggest influences that inspired George Lucas with the Star Wars universe, and the character of Luke Skywalker, the character of Obi-Wan Kenobi, the character of Darth Vader. I mean, basically all of those characters were based on archetypes that are explained very clearly and in great detail, how these character archetypes are consistently in the best stories. And when I say best, I mean not only most popular, but longest lasting, timeless stories that survive after thousands of years, where certain elements of these stories resonate with human beings, regardless of what culture they come from and the era in which they live. So, for example, with Luke in the story of Star Wars, you have this young, inexperienced person, ignorant to many of the ways of the world, and they are going to go on an adventure, which is going to open up their mind to the wider world around them. And through this adventure they go on, their character is going to change. They're going to become stronger through trials and tribulations. They're going to become wiser through experiences where they're forced to confront things they never had to confront before. And in order to, live through the experiences, they're forced to learn new things, which they can then apply to their life going forward into the future. You have the old, wise mentor archetype in Obi-Wan Kenobi, whose purpose is to guide the young adventurer and help them survive, the horrors of the world. And it just goes on and on. And one of the things that I like so much about Joseph Campbell's work was that he didn't set out to prove any particular assumption. He was curious about why some stories and some character types seemed to resonate with people, regardless of what country they came from, what language they spoke, what time period they lived in. Because you could look at something like Homer's The Odyssey, right? Or the Iliad. And those two stories have been translated into so many different languages. And they've literally been around for thousands of years. And there are people today in countries all over the world who are finding just as much relevance in the Odyssey and the Iliad, a story like Beowulf, stories like that, just as much relevance in those stories today as the audience they were actually written for thousands of years ago. So Eric Canetti is continuing with his point about confusing theme with ideology, and he says, so they cross into activism and are heavy-handed with their points. Instead, it would benefit the story if they introduce theme through different characters and have them react accordingly. Exactly. And you could take something as quote-unquote trivial as He-Man, Masters of the Universe, and there's an example of a show where an episode would have a theme, like let's say how to be a good friend, right? And you're marketing this show, these toys to children, so you can't get too complicated with the quote unquote lesson you hope they learn. And it's not going to do any good, as Eric is saying here in his previous comments about being heavy-handed with their points. With people, especially with children, you have to be subtle enough that they don't think you're pointing your finger at them and telling them what to do, or preaching at them, telling them how bad of a person they are.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
has nobody learned anything about the fact that kids are rebellious?
Exactly. Exactly. So the I don't want to keep using the word genius, but I'll just say that the intelligence of the creators of the cartoon, it allowed them to take a very simple concept like how to be a good friend, right? You don't have to make it any more complicated than that. You can basically show in the 22-minute episode what it means to be a good friend, some ideas for how to be a good friend, and then what the results are of being a good friend. And so you could take just those three very simple concepts, which all relate to the same thing, and you could make a 22-minute episode where basically Cringer is having difficulty with the idea of how to be a good friend, and you could have Prince Adam and Tila and Man at Arms, and they're all in some situation, and it's conflict, it's drama, right? And through that, Cringer learns how to be a good friend, or by his examples, he shows someone else how to be a good friend, right? And you could get the same messaging, your same 3 points you want to get across, you can get them across without being heavy-handed and I'm going to tell you how it is, in your writing, in your drawing, in your acting, depending on the medium. And so people are going to be far more receptive to it because, as you said, Russ, not only are kids rebellious, but grown-ups are essentially large children with more years to accumulate knowledge and hopefully wisdom. But the older we are, and there's always exceptions, of course. There's always going to be some people who like being told what to do. But generally speaking, there's not a lot of people who like being told what to do. Generally speaking, most adults, even though they understand that they have to go along to get along, especially when it comes to their careers, most people, I believe, if they could have unlimited wealth, like they just wake up and there's a $1 billion under their pillow every morning, they would choose not to work because they probably don't find much fulfillment in it. There are exceptions, of course. People who love what they do and make a living at it, they'd probably still do the same thing, regardless of whether they made money or not.
Yeah.
But for the people who, quote unquote, have to work, they feel like they have to work,
they'd stop.
They would stop, right?
Yeah.
Because if money is no longer motivating them to do what they have to do, take that out, they would stop. Well, what is it that they would do that they would enjoy? In my opinion, they would probably do more of the things that bring them entertainment, happiness, joy, right? So if they're going to spend more time with those things that entertain them, bring them happiness, then there must be something deep in the brain that they are responding to that entertainment provides. Right?
Yeah.
So my question is, if we are going to be providing entertainment to people, yes, we need to make it interesting, first of all. If it's not interesting, they're not going to care, right? That's just a given. Common sense. So if we can make it interesting, then we've gone, I would say maybe 3/4 of the way to getting them to consume that entertainment product, whatever it is. But then we have to keep it interesting in order to keep them interested, right? Pretty simple. Well, what if in our entertainment, we can provide something that's interesting on a pure entertainment basis and a pure escapism level, but then we can also, within that, we can present some things that speak to them on a deeper level, things that they can relate to as a human being, like things like overcoming loneliness, or being a good friend, or any of the quote unquote morality tales that you could find in a He-Man cartoon, or that you could find in some of the classic, like Aesop's fables, right? Or Grimm's fairy tales, where there's entertainment there, but then there's also something more, I don't want to say more relevant, more meaningful, maybe. But it just speaks to you on a different level.
Yeah, but you could say that about, I don't know, something more recent like The Simpsons. Maybe not so much now, but certainly the sort of the older series.
First 5 years or so.
Yeah, where you could see there was a moral in there. Homer's an idiot, but he's a well-meaning idiot. And he loves his family, and his family love him, and there's the whole sort of family around the wider family around that, and the friends and the people in the characters in the show, and there was pretty much always some kind of moral in the show, about doing the right thing. Okay, there was a few wrong things done as well, but it was just generally, it was just this kind-heartedness to it.
Yeah.
There was a kindness about the show that there probably isn't now. And I think it's that kind of thing you're talking about. It's just like being able to entertain, but at the same time, not so much get across like a moral definitive, just a kindness, just an insight into the human condition, that people can walk away from that story and go, oh, right, well, that's chimed with me. Something's happened there, which meant that I'm seeing the world potentially slightly differently.
I think, yeah, I agree. I think that presenting ideas through entertainment, if we present ideas through entertainment that people can think about, that's far more meaningful,
yes,
far more impactful, and far more desirable to the consumer of that entertainment, versus trying to tell them some bit of morality or tell them some bit of how they should live their life.
Yeah, and it's also far more likely to stay in people's heads if you can get it across to them in a far more subtle way, that they go away and think about it. Exactly what you were saying. Kids don't like being told to do. Most adults probably don't like being told to do. If a story is saying do this, then they don't think about that story once it's done, whether it's a good story or not. But if the story is saying think about this, or what about this as a subject, or what about this as a situation, then they're more likely to think about that, come back to that, revisit that story, whether it's a film, a book, a comic book, whatever, afterwards. And there's only certain, I can only remember certain films that, 3 or 4 days after I've watched it, I've thought about it. I've actually thought about, and get this in, let's get all this into perspective. I'm thinking about a film, in most cases, a story of made up characters and made up places that don't exist. And yet I'm considering in the abstract the situation that was in that film.
Right.
But that means that film has said something to me. That means that the book or the comic book has said something to me, that I've actually thought about it days after consuming it, rather than just saying, that's it, I've forgotten it, it's all over. And those are the stories that you want to make, really.
Yeah.
Not that you want to change people's lives, not that you want to be sort of like some kind of held up by some award as to say this is so incredible literature or art or whatever. You just want to be able to connect with people on a level where they will think a little bit about what you've said and what you've put out in front of them, and maybe the concepts that you've come up with might chime with some people. I would say, from my personal perspective, drawing comics, if somebody reads a comic book that I've written or been involved in the storytelling of, and it makes them think about something, then my job is done. I mean abstractly think about an issue or a subject or a situation, and if it inspires someone to go away and make a comic, then that's it. My job is definitely done.
Yeah.
And it only has to be one person. I mean, I know we want to sell lots of comics, but if you just make one other person, you've connected. And that's what storytelling's about, really, isn't it? It's connecting with those readers, that audience, and trying to get those concepts across to people. And if you, exactly as we're saying, if you're too heavy-handed, there's not a chance that you'll get across to those people, because they'll just put it down and they'll not think about it again.
Well, and
got to be far more subtle than that.
And the power of story is so ingrained. I think it's written into the fabric of the human brain. I mean, look at advertising. Advertisers understand that aside from all of the gimmicks that they use to try to capture your attention in that first few seconds, like on television, commercials, the audio is broadcast louder than the audio level of the show that you're actually interested in watching. They're trying to break you out of, if you were zoning out, they're trying to capture your attention.
Yeah.
And then the first image or couple images that you see are targeted to appeal to the part of your brain that goes, ooh, I wonder if I should buy that. And then in the advertisement, they actually tell you a story. They will present a character or multiple characters, and then they will have a scenario that the character or characters are in, and they'll go through some sort of adventure, I'll call it. It's just, things progress from one point to another, whatever that is. And then there's some sort of resolution. And all of that is designed to try to get the people viewing the advertisement to come to a conclusion of, I should buy that, or I need to buy that.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a lot of things in advertising that I actually like because it so effectively uses storytelling principles. And then there's a lot of stuff in advertising I don't like because I think it's exploitive. And I think that they use, there's so much psychological research that is used and exploited by advertisers because they're just trying to manipulate you into, a purchase. It's not
when ads are good, they're good.
Yeah, it goes from, we're going to present this story to you in a way that we hope you'll be entertained by it, and we hope that you'll decide to buy our product versus the competition. Like, we earned your business, right? That's one way of advertising. Another way is to just try to manipulate you by using knowledge of human psychology and neuroscience to try to just manipulate you into a purchase. And as far as I'm concerned, that's not earning your business. That's trying to, in a way, it's trying to deceive you into a purchase.
I mean, there's a lot of deception in advertising. I think it used to be more sort of some aspire, some inspire. Yeah, exactly. A lot of advertising was either straightforward, buy this now, or it was aspirational, buy this and be better, or it was inspirational, as in it was entertaining, and so you were possibly drawn towards the product. There's advertising, certainly in this country, has gone completely downhill. The kind of advertising consultancy that's full of people that think that to make an advert, we're a bunch of creative people who go out and photograph wildlife would have enough money to buy an electric Jaguar car. They're completely off the scale. They're not in the same world as all the people that they're trying to advertise to. That's for sure. Even the ones that are well off enough to buy the Jaguar. That's just it seems that it's gone completely the other way now, and again, it's just heavy-handedness in any kind of storytelling, even advertising.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like I don't know, Russ, if in the UK they have something similar, but in the US, the Super Bowl every year, it's known just as much, possibly more, for the advertisements as it is for the game itself. It's the biggest, most consequential game in American football, and more people actually tune in to watch the commercials, the advertisements, than to watch the game itself.
That's where they drop all the trailers, or they used to drop trailers for films and stuff like that, didn't they?
Yeah, it's they do that, and they also well, there's the halftime show too, but as far as the advertisements go, a lot of people, when they tune in for those advertisements, it's not because they think that it's purely entertainment in and of itself, although for some people it is. But for a lot of people, they know that at work the next day, people are going to be standing around the coffee machine or the water cooler talking about, oh, did you see da-da-da-da advertisement? And so they want to participate in that. They don't want to look like they don't know what they're talking about. So they'll watch them. And one of the things I noticed years and years ago is that most of those, aside from, well, even film trailers, in a way, they're telling you a story. They're telling you an abbreviated version of the story of the film, and they're hoping that they can interest you enough to go pay to watch the entire film. But a lot of times nowadays, they have serialized storytelling in the Super Bowl advertisements. So they'll play one ad at the beginning of the game, and then they'll play another ad maybe halfway between the beginning and the halftime break. Then they'll have another ad during the halftime break, and then another ad between the halftime break and the end of the game. So you're getting part one of the story, part two of the story, part three of the story, part four of the story.
Episodic advertising.
It's episodic advertising.
Right.
Those are marketing people who understand the power of story. They're going to try to get you to still stay tuned in after that big halftime show, because they don't want you to tune in for the commercials from pregame to halftime and then go get on with the rest of your day. They want you to stay hooked for the entire game.
They have another way of doing that over here, because we don't have that kind of advertising over here. They have occasionally done an episodic advert, but we don't have big enough TV events. We just don't have that. They have done it in the past where we had like it would be the first time a film would be shown, a network premiere of a film. But that's just now with streaming. It doesn't mean anything anymore. So we don't have the same events. Yeah. So I think what they moved to the whole of an advertising. So a whole like 6-minute block or something that would have 12 adverts in it, one advert. And so that they sit you through this one ad, which is a story.
Yeah.
And then what they'll do is they'll replay that advert later on, cut down to a minute.
Okay.
So they try to keep people coming in that way.
Yeah.
And then eventually, 2 weeks later, they'll put up an advert that might finish the story off. So that it kind of keeps you hooked.
Oh, we lost Russ. The BBC must have been spying on him. They didn't like what he was saying about their advertising partners, so they kicked him out. Well, hopefully he'll come back. Here he is.
Wasn't
the BBC got you, didn't they?
Got me. They caught me. It was me talking about advertising.
So you were saying that they do that episodic advertising trick.
Yeah, they do it that way, but I've not seen it for a little while. Have you got a license for that? You have to have a license for everything now. They don't seem to do that as much now. I mean, but the advertising over here is shocking now. It's just awful. We pretty much, most of the things my wife watches, she records, and she skips the adverts. Yeah. And the only time we have to watch adverts, if we watch like the independent channels player, they force you to watch adverts. It's rare we do that. Most of the time, if we're going to watch something, it's normally on Amazon or Netflix or something like that. So I don't know quite where advertising is going, to be honest, because it's viewing figures for the TV are falling through the floor.
Yeah, well, a lot of them have moved to internet advertising. They're spending as much, if not more, on internet advertising models than on television.
And internet advertising doesn't work either. No, I shouldn't tell anybody that, should I?
Well, I mean, it's this constant race of trying to stay ahead of the viewers who disable, ads in all these different ways. Yeah. And they're constantly trying to get around that. Yeah.
Well, it's when I watch YouTube on the browser I use, I don't get any ads. I get it. I don't know how it does it, but it removes everything. Whereas I'll watch it on the PS4 or whatever, and I'm shocked by how many ads come up during videos, because when I watch it on my computer, I get no ads at all. I mean, that must really mess with YouTube.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
must really pee them off.
They're constantly trying to figure out new ways to get money. Like, for example, recently they added that quote unquote feature where if you like a recorded video, you can quote unquote applaud. So you can basically send what's like a super chat to the person who
Right.
recorded the video.
Okay,
But of course, YouTube's going to take their 30% cut.
of course.
So they're always coming up with ways. I mean, they're doing different things with the ads themselves, but they're also still trying to come up with ways to get you to pay those creators outside of the ads, because YouTube will take 30% of it. I mean, the story of advertising itself might be worth going into at some point. There's some really interesting documentaries and books about how advertising has evolved, and it's all about, I believe, well, there's two motivations really. The primary one is money, trying to make more and more money off of advertising. I understand the profit motive. I don't complain about that. Hey, we've got a He-Man animator in the house. John Celestri animated
John.
both the classic He-Man and She-Ra. Well, welcome to the
John.
show. Glad you could join us.
John's a man.
Yeah, he's fantastic. I was saying something about, what was it about advertising? Oh, anyway, lost my train of thought. Yeah, I mean, as far as there's the profit motive. As far as how advertising has evolved, there's the profit motive, but then there's also the understanding of human psychology and how they can try to exploit those parts of the brain that are, impulsive. They want to try to get you to act impulsively rather than thinking critically, right? However, I say, and I don't have any research to back this up, this is just my opinion, but I believe that for a lot of people, that approach doesn't work as well as if they try to appeal to the reasoning centers of the brain and use their storytelling abilities to try to appeal to a person's reason and convince them why that product is better than the competitor's product. Now, there are some people.
The problem you got is half the population of fools.
I was just going to say, you've got now several generations who have been raised on, first it was television, but now the internet.
Yeah.
And when you're raised on television and the internet, your attention span gets programmed to decrease over time to the point where when you have real purchasing power, so many people now act more on impulse than they do on reason versus previous generations.
I'll wind that back and be more empathetic about it and not call them fools. I'll call them willing. Let's call them willing consumers. Let's call them that, because everybody's got a journey and everybody's got a reason and everybody has their own unique life, and no one is better than anyone else as far as base values are concerned. Everyone deserves the same kind of respect. But it is without doubt there are people that buy in, whether it's through being taught that way or whether that's because that's the way they are. There's half the population, definitely are in this country, just buy in. Yeah. And I mean, when I talk about buy in, I mean consumerism, government must save me.
Yep.
No self-responsibility really whatsoever. Can't understand why they can't have things when they want them.
Right.
And I was, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I was tempted to think, ooh, young'uns, but it isn't. It isn't young people.
Yeah.
It's just a percentage of people, because there are people older than me and the same age as me that I've come across that are just like, why isn't the government saving me? Why why isn't why can't I have the things that I want? And they kind of lose touch with reality, the reality of making things happen for yourself, and don't want to get too. I don't go get dragged into politics. I like the country because we're not socialist. This is not a socialist country. None of those work particularly, but we do have safety nets. We have the NHS, and we have income support and that kind of thing. And I think they're a great. I'm happy to put my tax money into that because I feel that we should all help each other. But at the same time, I expect people to get off their backside and go and make something of themselves. And when people turn around and go, well, why have you got something and I haven't? It's like, well, I earned it.
Yeah.
and believe you me, I didn't get any hand ups ever. It is weird that you have half the population. Almost, it seems like half the population are like, oh, what can I do? I'll just have to buy the latest iPhone instead.
Well, I think a lot of it, honestly, I think goes back to storytelling, because politicians are storytellers.
Oh, they are.
For better
telling
and
you the truth, that's for sure.
For better and for worse. The most effective politicians, in my opinion, are the most effective storytellers, because they convince people, oftentimes through fiction, to make.
But again, you've got that percentage of people that are keen to believe.
Right, but whether you've got people who want to believe or people who are more suspicious, more discerning, the politicians who are the best storytellers are the ones who convince the most people to vote for this, vote for that, vote for them again and again and again. Now, some politicians obviously benefit from, like you say, they'll be in let's say a district or a county or a state or whatever, where there's a higher percentage of people who like to be very reactive and impulsive and are quick to, their confirmation bias is so strong that anybody who says what they want to hear, that's the politician for them. So there are some geographic areas where that sort of person tends to congregate in. And then in other areas, there's a greater percentage of people who are more suspicious, who are more rational and are more likely to use critical thinking. But at the end of the day, I think, the politician, it's one of the things, and I'm not going to get into my own political views. I'm not going to get into political debates on this channel. But one thing that I'll point out, 2 different presidents, U.S. presidents, that were great storytellers. One was Ronald Reagan, one was Bill Clinton. And they both were very popular, and they both had very vocal detractors. Right. And the commonality, even though they were very different in a lot of their political messaging, the thing that they had in common was they were both excellent storytellers. And so what they were able to do is capture the imaginations of a lot of voters who put them into office. And then when it came time for re-election, they did it again, even though they both had some problems in their first term, that if another politician came along who could have successfully communicated to people in a way where they convince the voting bloc that, I, as politician B, am a better choice than politician A, and use stories to do that, to whether it's to appeal to their emotions or to appeal to their intellect, then those guys could have been, 1-term presidents instead of 2-term. But because they were so good at communicating and they were so good at storytelling, they both, just to the best of my election, won in landslide victories.
Vote for Kang. I was actually watching that Simpsons one where they had Clinton against Bob Dole.
Oh, really?
They were both actually aliens, but dressed up as the two of them. and he managed to throw them both. They agreed that they should look after the world and be nice to each other and run the world together. And he blew them both out the airlock by accident. And then the aliens took over, and they were being whipped. And Marge said, "I don't know how we got into this situation." She said, Don't ask me. He said, I voted for Kang. It was just, it was just, there was so much in it. I was looking at it and thinking, yes, modern day. The Simpsons do it again.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that pretty much does it for our show today.
Yeah, that was an interesting discussion. I like this. This is
I
like
really-
those things that you used to watch when you were a kid, when your mum and dad were up late and you were trying, you wanted to stay up late,
Yeah.
but you knew that you should be going to bed. So you kind of sat down beside the sofa where they couldn't see you, and it was just some boring. When you were a kid, it was just so boring. It's these people are talking and talking and talking, but actually, they were really interesting discussion programs, and people would sit around and discuss. But back in the day, when people actually discussed things, you don't get that on news anymore. You get like snippets, and long form discussion is something that's actually re-emerged on YouTube, where people can sit and discuss points, and have like the chat coming in and giving you their opinions. That's priceless. Priceless.
I almost ended the show. I forgot we're going to show some artwork. We're going to show a couple of layouts from chapter 2 in The Outliers. So we'll do that before we shut things down. Apologies to people who already dropped off. That was entirely my fault. So this is from chapter 2. I had mentioned how the Outliers were in their headquarters, and they hear this explosion, and it turns out that some villains are breaking in, and so they've got to deal with that. And the Bear Man from chapter 1, our friend Dennis, he's here in panel 1. He's jumping in the air, he's getting shot. And then in panel 2, he's on the ground, and we'll find out how badly hurt he is in the course of the story. We've got Night Falcon, who in chapter 1 realized that the flight capabilities he'd been thinking about putting in his suit were definitely going to be useful. So by chapter 2, he has added that capability to his suit. So he's flying now, and we see him come flying in here in panel 3. And then down here at the bottom of the page, we've got High Tea and the Saint, who are reacting to a very serious threat that they'll have to deal with. And then this is a page I wanted to show because we're going to have backer cameos in the book. So people will be able to purchase, if they wish, to get themselves drawn into the book. And we're still trying to figure out exactly how many people that's going to be. There will be a minimum of 6 because we've got these close-ups that we can do. We're going to work out whether or not we can have additional people that are drawn, and if they can be drawn with enough detail so that the backer would recognize themselves on the page. If we can do that, then we'll offer more of those spots for backers. But if it turns out that we don't think it would be really a fair representation of the person, then we won't offer it beyond the 6. Although you guys can let us know. I mean, if you think it's worth it to offer a drawn-in tier at a much lower cost, with the understanding that the depiction of the character is going to be fairly small, but you're interested in that, then we could certainly talk about it. Jim Cox says, I was in a book and didn't know which I was. See, that's exactly what I want to avoid. With a page like this, where you've got those 6 panels on top, you get a close-up of your character, and you'll also, for those 6, definitely, you'll also appear in a smaller full figure shot in earlier pages of the story. So once you see that it's you, you'll see yourself on several pages and you'll get a nice close up here. If there's people who are interested in maybe, paying a lot less money and just having a smaller figure represent them, then, we could certainly consider doing that.
Okay.
All right. So I think that is the end of our show. Thanks everybody for joining us. We really appreciate it. Looks like the results of our poll, 53% say no, He-Man is not prettier. Classic He-Man is not prettier than classic She-Ra. So She-Ra wins the beauty contest. Sorry, He-Man.
Yeah, that's...
Thanks everyone for joining us. We appreciate it. We know that your time is valuable, and we're certainly grateful you spend it with us. So thanks again, and I hope we all go out and make a great day.